The Average James Podcast.
Hello. On today's episode of the Average James Podcast, we're going to be covering something that is, I think, a simplistic topic, but one that also causes you to think. The cost of living and the cost of speaking your mind is ironically the same. It's high. The cost is high. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at everything that's going on in the world recently, and I'm actually in the process of looking up something here just right quick, so bear with me. So, probably I would say, there's a lot of content that you could pick from, but in in the book of John, chapter 6, Jesus had just got done feeding 5,000 people. He had just found out that his cousin had passed away because he had been murdered. And then we get to this part in the scripture further down in John chapter 6 where Jesus starts talking about, in order to live, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. Of course, he was speaking metaphorically, but before this time, Jesus had many, many disciples. And on hearing how difficult it was going to be to follow Jesus, in chapter 6, verse 60, the Bible says that on hearing of this, many disciples said out loud and in their heart, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?" And from that point, they started grumbling. And Jesus says to them, "Hey, does this upset you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing." And then there are some of you who do not believe, for Jesus had knowing from the beginning which of them did not believe and which of them would betray him. One of those talking about Judas. And in verse 66, there's probably one of the saddest scriptures to me in the Bible, just from a perspective looking at it as a man. It's always sad when you lose friends, when you lose people that you thought you knew. Over the course of my life, I've had tons and tons of people I thought were friends, people I thought were family, people that I called brother, people that I called sister, not just in the church, but in the army, people that used to go out with me when I was living in the world, out to drink and carry on, do other things, people that you thought you were a lot closer with. And then whenever the going gets hard, then it's at that time you find out who your friends are. My dad used to tell me growing up, he said, you know, there's always going to be a ton of friends whenever you have a pool party, whenever you have people come over for a barbecue, but you find out how many true friends you have when you need to put a roof on your house, or when you're stuck in the ditch out in the country somewhere and you need somebody to come bail you out. It's funny, you find out how quickly your circle shrinks when that happens. In the same chapter where Jesus fed 5,000 people, if you go down from the beginning of chapter 6, you go all the way down to chapter 66. It says, "From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. And then in 67, Jesus turns and he looks to the 12 disciples that he had handpicked. And he says, do you want to leave me too? Or in some other translations, it actually says, you do not want to leave me too, do you? And this is where Simon Peter utters that famous verse where he says, Lord, where would we go? Where would we go? But the whole point I'm making here is Jesus had a lot of people that followed him, a lot of people that believed in him, a lot of people that loved handouts. I mean, yes, it was a miracle, but there's well over 5,000 people, maybe 10, 15, 20,000 people. The 5,000 were just men. So you can imagine women and children being there as well. And no one was complaining when they were getting free food. No one was complaining when I just saw this today. No one was complaining when they were getting leftovers that they could take home, something that didn't cost them anything. And a lot of people love these friendships that don't cost them anything either, where you have no skin in the game, where it's easy to just say, well, if I'm not having a good time anymore, then I'll just leave. And that's when Jesus turns and says, hey, are you guys going to leave me too? And then they said, no, where else are we going to go? As soon as it was going to cost people something, they said, whoa, this is too hard. We can't follow you anymore. And then they left. This is too hard. I don't want to be your friend. I don't want to be your follower. I don't want to be your disciple. So I'm out. And that is something that I'm sure anybody who listens to this can attest to, that, yeah, whenever you get close to someone, whenever you really truly become close friends with someone, it starts costing you something. It costs you your time. Sometimes true friendship is helping friends move and not expecting free pizza when you help. Just knowing that you're helping them should be enough because they're your friend. And, I would go so far as to say too that if you stop going to the same church, you should still be able to be friends and have conversations. We're not in cults. We're not in gangs. We're all supposed to be one body. I always hate it when people talk about the cowboy church, the black church, the Pentecostal church. We were all just supposed to be the church from the very beginning. And we should all be able to communicate with each other as the church. And it is disheartening at times when you have people that you think that you're close to that end up so easily turning around and walking away when it gets too hard. And I'm not talking about anything in particular. In this particular instance, I'm talking about Jesus. But also here recently, I've been speaking a lot of truths on my podcast. And my podcast has went down 91% since when I first started, and just 7 episodes later with some of the things that I've said. And I've been friends with people on Facebook for at least a lot of these people that's following me. I have 138 followers. Not a lot, just a little group of people really compared to everybody else that's out there that do these podcasts and have, millions of followers or whatever. That's not me, but I would expect, that if you have a disagreement, you should still be able to have a civilized conversation. You should still be able to be friends and move on. But like I said, not everybody wants to hear. Everyone wants to give their opinion, but not everybody wants to hear yours. And so it's really quite something. I was actually looking at my metrics earlier and found out that I went from, what I had before to just in like the last 2 weeks, give or take, going down 91%. Which, speaking of which, I do have a little good news here. Lacey Richards, I saw today that you like the channel. So thank you so much. And I want to just thank the 138 followers that's currently following me today, where, you guys have some backbone and I don't offend you. Or if I do offend you, you're still man or woman enough to continue to follow me and listen to me chirp my opinions in your ear. So the 138 of you, thank you for following me. Lacey, thank you for that like today. I have 0 stars still. If you want to go out there and you like what you're hearing, please give me some stars and help me continue to make this content. Of course, it is a hobby I love doing, but I always appreciate your guys' support and positive affirmation as well to make sure that you guys are actually enjoying listening to this. So that being said, I think that is a good segue into our next conversation. Just like having an opinion and speaking your mind can cost you relationships. It's cost me relationships with family before. It's cost me relationships with friends, with people in the church realm. It will cost you something. And you know what else is going to cost you something? This election, if you don't go vote. Hopefully, everybody that's listening, at least you 138 out there, hopefully you all are already registered to vote. I really hope so. Because this election, I do believe, is going to come down to the wire. I know it's not popular opinion. I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but I just have this feeling because I don't have a lot of confidence in our election system. It wasn't that long ago that we were able to know, and I remember staying up late when I was a kid. I was trying to stay up late so that I could figure out who was going to win the election back when Bill Clinton was running. Hey, Susan. I remember it, trying to go out and look and see who was going to win the election. This is way back, in the 90s when Bill Clinton was running. And Dad said, "No, you got to go to bed. You got school in the morning. Come on, man, you got to go to bed." My parents forced me to go to bed when I was a kid. Can you imagine that? The cruelty. But we used to know on election night who the president was. You were going to wake up the next morning and you know who they were. And honestly, now you just can't help but feel like it's rigged, even if it's not rigged. And hopefully this doesn't get me canceled. This is why I do my own podcast, so that maybe Facebook will reach out and grab this. They got algorithms that's listening to me talk. I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm an IT guy. I know it's true. Facebook, don't cancel me. So here's the thing. Back when Trump first beat Hillary Clinton and became president, I think we were all pleasantly surprised. Trump himself, I used to think that maybe Trump first ran as a joke, that that he didn't think he was going to go as far. He's one of those people too that's also suffered the assassination attempts, both figuratively and literally now, based off of his personal opinion and his views. Did you see where he went on the Joe Rogan podcast? And they shared a clip from just like 7 years ago when he went on The View, and they all hugged him. They talked about how, I think it was Barbara Walters who was saying, "Every time you're on the show, we just love you so much. We love that you're on the show." And they were all kissing him and they were all hugging him. And I don't know about you, but from the very moment that I learned about Hitler, I knew he was Hitler, right? You knew what he did in the Holocaust. You didn't change your opinion about him, chances are. Chances are, when you found out who Hitler was, he became the epitome of evil, and you couldn't stand him for the rest of time, right? So it's always fishy to me when you see these old videos where everyone's like kissing him and hugging him, and then just 6 years later, he can be a neo-Nazi Hitler wannabe like Hillary Clinton was talking about the other day. This just goes to show that it's really easy for people to just flip a script, decide they hate you, and unfollow. And also proves that speaking your mind, even if it's for the greater good, will cost you something. Trump said it just a couple months ago, where he said, I have billions of dollars. It would be easy for me to go out on a beach on one of my golf courses, to retire, do nothing else with the rest of my life and just live out my days and absolutely love it. But when I saw what a train wreck Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, insert DEI candidate here. When I started seeing how bad they were doing, I had to step in and do something. And so I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that he's going to win this time. But my only caveat is this, is that if he doesn't win, I don't think there's any way that we'll ever be able to win again. I know. That sounds extreme. But look at this. We have the momentum as Republicans, everything, the climate, looking at the Democratic side really panicking. It just appears right now that the wind is at our backs, that it's on our side, that we got a good chance of winning. And then when you hear the mayor of, I can't remember her name, but the mayor of Michigan come out and say, oh, well, we're not going to have our results because of mail-in balloting for at least a week after election night. That makes you go, ugh? Right? Like, what do you mean a whole week? You already know it's going to take you at least a week to count. And look, if they have another instance of Trump being ahead by millions of votes, everyone going to bed, and all of a sudden Kamala Harris being up by like 5 million votes because mail-in balloting, all hope will be lost. I will completely lose hope in our elections because, like Elon Musk said, if Kamala Harris wins this after having not a single delegate vote for her, if she wins this and allows illegal immigrants to pour in for 4 more years uninhibited, and then gives them all temporary citizenship status and allows all of them to vote, I really do think this isn't even fear mongering. I just think it's common sense that if we can't win this election now, you might as well go ahead and get ready for the rapture, because Kamala Harris is probably the most anti-Israel candidate to ever get this close to the White House. I think if Donald Trump can get in, that we have a good chance of maybe having another outpouring and a revival before the Lord's return. But my thing is this. I'm not trying to be, fearful. I'm not afraid. But I do know, with common sense that regardless of what happens, I feel like you just kind of feel something's in the air, If Donald Trump wins, I think we can all anticipate some kind of left-wing Palestinian uprising, right? And if Kamala Harris wins, I mean, we as Republicans, and I'm assuming most of the people who follow me on my podcast are Republicans as well. It's just a hunch. But I know that we would be more peaceful, but when you have people like those in Michigan that say, give us a week to count the ballots, it's almost like, hey, we know that Donald Trump's going to be ahead at the closing of the election day. So just give us a little bit more time to find the votes that we need. Isn't that what it sounds like? Am I the only one that think it sounds like they're saying, hey, you just got to give us a little bit more time? But I mean, it's like that age old saying, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. Kamala Harris has went on the campaign trail on 60 Minutes where she doesn't have a teleprompter, and very easy to tell that she doesn't know what she's doing. She had that town hall where she said, "Hey, just give me a little bit. Let me take some notes back. I'll think on it, and then I'll get back to you." Can I tell you that I'm a nobody, a guy in his basement. I don't have a teleprompter in front of me. I'm just talking, and my opinions right now that are in this little noodle here and down in my heart, they stick with me regardless of the information. I'm going to take whatever information that you give me, I'm going to filter it through my common knowledge, my logic, what's in here, what's in my heart, and I'm going to give you my opinion. The problem with Kamala Harris is that she's a Democrat socialist puppet. She has no opinions, she has no thoughts. She does whatever the machine tells her to do, and that's her thought for the day. That's as easy as that I can make it. That's why she changes her mind on fracking. That's why she will change her mind on the border. That's why she'll change her mind on, stuff like the Green New Deal and insert policy here. She will change based off of what she is told to change and based off of where the path of least resistance is. Just to give you all who have not voted yet, I'm among them. I have to go vote tomorrow. So hopefully there's not assassins outside trying to take my vote away. But I got to go vote tomorrow. And if you all haven't had a chance to go out and vote yet, let me tell you something that you probably already remember. Now, I know that we had COVID, right? 2020 was a big year for COVID. That being said, when I was doing my research and my statistics, I gave Joe Biden and Kamala Harris the benefit of the doubt when I was looking at everything I was looking at here. And I even went through unbiased, some might even say slightly liberal sources, or really liberal sources in some cases, like the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, and also a couple of other news articles like the average prices of gas, the average prices of food, the average prices of housing. Now, 19, I'm not a big math whiz, but let's count it together. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That's 5 years. And now I did a little change. So we're going to go with, like I said, the end of Trump's presidency in 2019. We're going to get rid of just, the 2020. We'll just say 2020 was a bust. And then we have these 3 years, which kind of evens out my handicap because 2024 isn't over yet. We still got a couple more months. And we know that Donald Trump won't be in the White House until January. Get a load of this, everyone. Food prices have increased 27.5% since 2019, driven by inflation at nearly 5% per year. For example, what cost $20 in food items in 2019 now costs $25.50. in 2024. This inflation, they call it supply chain issues, pandemic disruptions, whatever you want to say. 5% year over year is insane. When you consider, let me just tell you this, at work, we're guaranteed generally a raise, and my job isn't solely like this. It's places everywhere pretty much do this, where they'll give you a salary increase, not based off of merit, but based off of inflation. So it's not really a raise for good work. It's just a raise because of how inflation's happening, right? So with that in mind, almost every year, businesses will give you at least mine would give a 3 or 4% increase. Now, I just read here that every year it's increasing by nearly 5%. So what that tells me is that not only is everything here getting more expensive, but the raises that I'm getting at work is even less than what's happening in the economy. So food is going up by 5% and I'm getting a 3% raise. That's crazy. That's crazy because now what that ends up doing, if you just look at any type of economics in general, is now you just take my base salary and every time you're just kind of chipping off at it, which I really think is the Democratic's way to get us closer to socialism, because as you chip that off, I'm now, instead of being middle class, I'm starting to go further and further closer to being a lower class. And I think the goal is to really just get rid of, which is what socialism does, by the way, is to get rid of the middle class altogether, to where you just have your poor population and then the one percenters. And would it surprise you to know that everybody, and I know what you're saying, well, Donald Trump is a billionaire. Yeah, I get that. But so is all of the Democrats that are trying to make others pay their fair share. And I want to know what that fair share is. I don't want to get off on a big tangent here, but what is the fair share? You know what I mean? I'll tell you what a fair share would be. How about a flat tax? How about we do a 7% flat tax for everybody? That's what I want. I'll even give you a 10% flat tax. If I have to pay 10%, then you have to pay 10%. But you know who's not going to do that? Everyone that's in the House, everyone that's in the Senate. Don't even get me started on that. Moving on, gas. Gasoline prices have seen substantial rises, approximately 30%, y'all, 30% from the 2019 levels. A gallon of unleaded gas was $2.64 in 2019, but reached around $3.34. I don't know if you noticed, I went out to the pump and magically it's down to $2.98 a week before Election Day. Guess what, Washington? I'm not stupid. And you cannot get the gas prices a little close to what they were when Donald Trump was president and expect me to forget how much I paid at the pump every day for the last 3 years. Hello. While prices spiked dramatically in 2022, they seem to have settled a little bit. I wonder why. But they just keep citing global uncertainty. Let's go to another big one. Housing. Housing costs have surged. Surged. That's my word for the day. Surged. Like a tidal wave. Housing costs, the average for homes, increased 47%. 47% from 2020 to 2024, which has priced many out of home ownership altogether. And you got Kamala Harris, who wants to give first-time home buyers $20,000 to put down on a house. You know what that does? I'm not a first-time home buyer, but they're going to require the people selling the houses are going to require an extra $20,000 because they know that you're going to get that if you're a first-time home buyer. So what does that make me do as a seller? I got to increase my housing cost, what I'm going to sell for, to try to make up for what I know that you're going to get from the government. And you know what ultimately that does? That raises the inflation of the dollar and makes it to where our dollar is actually worth less money. Contrary to popular belief, we cannot keep printing money and expecting us to not have any consequences. Reagan said it best when he talked about us having a brief relief now, but we're putting the weight and the debt on the backs of our children. If we love our children, we should find a way to actually decrease the debt. I know it's not popular, but man, wouldn't that be nice? Interest rates are over 7% for a 30-year mortgage. Interest rates are over 7%. When Donald Trump was in, it was 2.64%. That's insane on a 30-year mortgage. It makes it super challenging. All these people that's going to be voting for Kamala Harris, I think about here in Richmond, all of the people that are in Earlham that might be getting out of college soon, that need to find a place to stay. What are you going to do? Do you know how much money you got? Let's just say the housing market right now, the average price of a house in Richmond, Indiana, let's just say it's around $200K. Now you tack on 37% interest year over year for 30 years compared to 2.64%. That's a huge difference. I got an email, I got a letter in the mail where they were trying to get me to refinance, and they showed my APR versus what it would be for me to refinance, to redo my kitchen. They said it was going to cost like $30,000 or something for me to redo the inside of my house. And just on the APR alone, they said I would pay $150,000 more than what I would be paying now. So to get a temporary cosmetic fix in my house, I got to pay the price of a whole nother house, y'all, a whole nother house in order for me to get that done. And you want me to vote for somebody that's going to try to give away free money? That's not the way the economy works. Go to school. How are you a lawyer and you don't know any of this stuff? Here's something else that most people don't talk about. You've heard about gas, I'm sure. You've heard about housing, I'm sure. Have you heard about utilities and insurance? Chances are, if you have a house, you have. Both utilities and property costs have risen with property insurance premiums. Just in 1 year, from 2022 to 2023, 21%. 21%. Rising operational costs, especially in housing, are affecting the affordability for both renters and homeowners alike. I saw somebody that was advertising renting their like 1,200 square foot house. A starter home, really. And they were asking like $1,500 a month for that house. I remember when I moved back up to Richmond with my wife, we had just gotten married. Of course, this was like 10 years ago, but it was $500 a month for rent. $575 was getting kind of expensive. Now, $1,500, and that price is going to go up by another $500 a month if you want to have a pet with you. God forbid you want to have a pet and live the American dream. They're going to price gouge you. But you know why they have to price gouge you? Because the housing market is so bad, the people that's renting the homes are struggling too. And then you got Kamala Harris out here that's talking about how she wants to give small businesses a $20,000 or $50,000 whatever tax credit, and she doesn't know that that's not writing a check to that person for it. That's a tax credit. That's not money, Kamala. But I know she's not listening. I know she's not listening. But for the love, if you haven't voted yet, if you don't vote, this is your fault. Whatever happens is your fault. You need to vote for the person that's going to be not somebody that you agree with on everything. I don't agree with Trump on everything. There's some things when he's talking about IVF. There's some things when he's talking about abortion. I know he gave it back to the states. It was a win overturning Roe v. Wade. But I'm just saying, like, overall, there's some things that I disagree with Trump on. Sure. You know what though? I disagree with Kamala Harris a lot more. And when she says, hey, you guys were at the wrong rally, you guys need to go somewhere else, she's telling you what she believes. And so, you know what? We are going to go somewhere else. And you're going to be surprised how many Christians there are still in this nation, because this is a Christian nation. And this is going to be a Christian nation until God takes his church out, whether they like it or not. So please vote. Now, another thing that I found really interesting is immigration population and pressures. Did you know that I tried to do a chat GPT, and I pay for the premium because I do a lot of work with chat GPT. So I pay for a premium to get better answers and more interaction, more responses. And it wouldn't answer me on how many illegals were coming into the country year over year from when Donald Trump was in versus Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, which is something that's completely glossed over. Kamala Harris is such a bad person, just 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 as she is. Not even talking about the presidency, just as her as a person. She's just such a horrible human being that we forget that Joe Biden is still the president of the United States, that this guy with dementia still has access to the nuclear launch codes. like, like, if anything, we should vote against and maybe even impeach Kamala Harris for her dereliction of duty, for not 25th Amendmenting this guy and putting somebody in the White House that actually knows what. I mean, at least the Speaker of the House, he can carry a sentence. You know what I mean? Hey, well, and I think we would have to go to the Speaker of the House, because I think personally that the president and the vice president are mentally unfit to hold office. But I digress. Man, this is probably the most fired up I've been in an episode, because, and look, now I'm getting a slow connection. Like, all of a sudden, I'm getting these slow connections. Who's trying to shut me up? I will not be silenced. I was only silent because I was taking a drink of Diet Coke. So, there's something, too, I wanted to say here. And I've been going now, holy crap, for 42 minutes. I need to get off my soapbox, don't I? My wife told me to shut up from the other room. So I got to be quick. I'm coming, baby. But she's working too, so. One thing that the Democrats always did a lot better than the Republicans did is their voting effort. Like, they would go out and they would harvest votes. Like, they would go to the nursing home. And I don't know if you saw where they said that Jimmy Carter voted for Kamala Harris. And then they showed Jimmy Carter and it looked like he shouldn't have been outside. Like, he was in a gurney. His mouth was hanging open. He was, I guess, alive, but you couldn't tell if he was alive or if he was just kind of dead on some life support machine or something. And I can't be the only one that was looking at that thinking, how did he vote for Kamala Harris in his right mind? I mean, props to him for being so old, because most people, they don't live that long. I think he's in his mid 90s. He's been in hospice care for many, many years. And you can't help but looking at him, slack jawed, mouth hanging open, thinking, who was holding his hand to actually make him vote, right? Pretty sure that's against the law. I'm not allowed to go in and help you vote. Help me help you, right? I'm not supposed to be able to do that. But that's what these Democrats will do. They'll go out to these nursing homes and these other places where maybe they shouldn't be voting, or maybe they wouldn't vote at all, but they'll go there and they'll say, hey, cast this provisional ballot. We'll count them all for you. So they have a huge get out the vote effort. And Republicans, I'm going to knock myself too. I mean, us as Republicans, we tend to have a harder time getting out and voting like we should. I remember one time here in Richmond, Dave Snow ended up winning, being the mayor here. And the reason he won, I'll never forget it. It was on the news. The reason he won was because there was something like only 1,200 votes or something in a town that has like, what is it, like 50 or 60,000 people. That's literally like, I don't know. I can't do math like that off the top of my head, but that's a lot of people that didn't vote or that didn't care about local politics. And unfortunately, that usually extends to the broader elections. And so, one thing that Donald Trump did do this year that I thought was just ingenious is this was a couple months ago. I was on Instagram and I was watching one of Trump's videos. And after his video was over, I just hit like, and I got a message, auto generated, of course. But I got an auto generated message saying, hey, have you voted yet? Here's where you can go to check if you voted. Here is, make sure here's the voting deadline. Here's a map where you can check to see where you can go vote. Vote early, don't wait. And you could tell he's learned a lot of lessons from 2020, because I think 2016 he won and was surprised, and I think Republicans as a whole were as well. I think 2020 we all were probably a little bit more cocky than what we should have been. We didn't think there was any way on God's green earth that Joe Biden was going to win the presidency, and he did. And we learned some lessons. And now I think that we've learned from those mistakes. We're going to really start to see a change this election cycle. I was really happy to see that he was pushing to get people to go out and vote and to go out and get people to vote early. I'm really hoping that this election is going to be a giant red wave. Hopefully, we don't even need Michigan, but we will see. We will see. I've been talking for 47 minutes, so I want to make sure that I go ahead and wrap this up way longer than what I normally talk, but very passionate about this issue. Oh, and just a quick shout out too. Did you notice that Trump went on the Joe Rogan Experience the other night, just yesterday, I think, and he crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. And that's something that, Kamala Harris, she was scheduled to go on the Joe Rogan Experience, and she backed out. I think Trump is, you could tell who's winning a campaign based off of the fun and excitement someone's having. If they look like they're, digging and going through the trenches and they're at war, they're probably losing the election. And you can tell Donald Trump's just having a good time. And he's been spending a lot of time trolling Kamala Harris. Any time that Kamala says that she's done something or that she's going to do something, Trump comes in and he does it better before she can do it. Like when she said, I worked at McDonald's. And so even if it was only for 15 minutes, Donald Trump actually did go and he worked at McDonald's for 15 minutes just to make sure. And from the drive-through window, wish Kamala Harris a happy birthday. Awesome move, just completely awesome. And then I don't know how long he's scheduled this to go on the Joe Rogan Experience, but there's a big thing about Kamala going on 60 Minutes and then her going on Joe Rogan. After the 60 Minutes debacle, just a horrible interview, she canceled the Joe Rogan Experience. And then right away, right at this last little push here, Donald Trump is on the show and he talks for like 4 hours or something like that. That is not something that Kamala Harris or Joe Biden could do without a teleprompter. And frankly, Joe Biden couldn't even do it now with a teleprompter. someone please take the nuclear football away from Joe Biden. If you're not comfortable giving it to him, chances are he probably shouldn't be president. Is there any way we can amend the Constitution to get Benjamin Netanyahu over here to be our president? Am I the only one that thinks that? Jeez. See, that's what a real man looks like, is old Ben. But anyhow, I digress. Thank you, 138 people out there that are following me. Thank you for the likes. Please leave your questions, leave your comments. I am going to read all the comments that were on this live video here very soon. But I just thank you all for listening. Thank you all for participating. This has been another episode of the Average James podcast. I am your low maintenance friend, the Average James. And until next time, you all have a great week. See you later.
The Average James podcast. Tune in fast. Good vibes that last. The Average James podcast.